Good morning, everyone. It'll just be a few moments before we get started. Just about ready to get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Larry Klein, and welcome to the 12th installment of my virtual office hours. People say they really appreciate these weekly live stream addresses, and so I will continue to do them as long as we shelter in place, and probably even longer than that, because I think it's really allowed people for me to give you updates on what's happened in the last week, as well as for me to answer your questions on a wider scale. There's a lot of people that have questions about the city, want to have some idea of where to go to get things done, and this also allows me to provide some words of encouragement on a weekly basis. I hope everyone's staying healthy. It's been very difficult. We are now through 12 weeks. So please remember to take care of yourself, both physically and mentally. Go outside. The weather's nice. That being said, it was pretty warm this week, and Sunnyvale started cooling centers. So if the temperature peaks again in the upcoming weeks, we will continue to open up cooling centers just to make sure that people have air conditioning if they need to get out of their house. Sheltering in place has helped flatten the curve, so please keep it up. I know that it's difficult, especially with the good weather and people wanting to mingle and that fatigue of staying at home, but it really is important, and that has stopped the spread of the virus, and you can do your part. Continue to wash your hands, continue to do a safe social distancing when you're out, only go out for essential items, and reduce the number of people that you come in contact. And above all, always remember to wear your mask when you're near people, whether or not you're inside of buildings or just walking through the park and getting close to people. So it really has made a difference. And if you need some sort of face covering, reusable, washable face coverings, definitely feel free to contact me. I have those. I'm able to give those out. There's lots of people that are sewing them still in our communities, and you can buy them online. You can buy them at Etsy shops and all that. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that are donating them, creating them, and sewing them themselves, and I think that makes a big difference. And we're not out of the woods yet. Things are opening up, and we'll talk a little bit about how the health order has changed this week in just a little bit. But before we begin our normal weekly overview, last week I started this address with a short discussion on racism. And I just want to reiterate what I said last week. Hate and racism have no place in our community. I talked a little bit about the hate crime that happened, a year ago in 2019, and how the community banded together, to unify and forge a way forward. And and the protests that have happened this week, have really struck a chord, with everyone. And the video has just been so hard to see, of George Floyd. And as a white man of privilege, I cannot begin to understand what my black friends and black constituents face on a daily basis. I'm here to listen to your specific concerns, and I've been talking to the city manager and the chief of our public safety, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Today I also wanted to kind of read through the joint statement that the city manager and I released yesterday. And I think it's really important to kind of go through that, verbally, just for those that didn't get a chance to read it. So let me get that document up. Okay. The recent killings of George Floyd in Minnesota, Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, and Breonna Taylor in Kentucky have once again inflamed the wound of racial injustice in America. These racially charged incidents are tragic and exasperating, and it must stop. We stand united with those in support of racial justice. We can no longer ignore the systemic racism and oppression felt by Black people and other people of color in our communities. Your pain is heartbreaking. We're listening and know we must do better. As public servants, it is our responsibility to treat all members of our community with dignity and respect and ensure everyone feels safe and welcome. We hold Sunnyvale public safety officers in high regard and will continue holding them to the highest standards. Words alone are not enough. We must act. Sunnyvale is not insulated from racism. Together, we faced the shock and grief caused by hate crime last year. Our community gathered and pledged to shine a light on racism and root it out. We must continue this work. Today, we jointly commit to creating a safe space for dialogue. We invite you to join the conversation. We will not rest until we better understand racial inequities and find effective and lasting solutions. And so that was signed by myself and Kent Steffens, the city manager. And if you want to be part of that dialogue, go to the Sunnyvale website. If you see that, there's a place to subscribe to Sunnyvale Unity mailing list and be updated on how we start doing some of that dialogue in our community. And it's kind of building exactly on what happened, a year ago. People have been asking. There will be a peaceful protest march tonight from 5 to 7 p.m., starting at Redwood Square in downtown and ending up at City Hall, where Chief No and I will be speaking. We're hoping that it will be a peaceful protest, and I've been working with the organizers, Sunnyvale High School students, on messaging and safety. If you are attending, please wear your face mask. Please wear your face covering and practice safe social distancing. As I look at videos from around the nation, a lot of this is tapping into the fatigue of COVID-19 and people out there not wearing masks, not doing safe social distancing. And I really worry about if there will be a spike of COVID cases in the upcoming weeks. Some people are afraid that it might get out of hand. I think it will be a peaceful rally, much like we've seen in Mountain View and other local cities. That being said, multiple businesses are concerned and have boarded up their windows. And, it only takes a few bad actors from outside of your community to cause problems. Target, Citibank, several of the restaurants along Murphy Avenue have boarded up their windows for tonight's event. And, I think it will be a peaceful protest, and hopefully that will be the case. So let's go on to our kind of standard COVID update for the week. We are now 80 days after the March 16th public health order that started the shelter in place to slow the spread of COVID-19. Since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot happens every day. I have conference calls, press conferences to watch. I confer with our elected leaders. I confer with other mayors and other council members, and I advocate for our city however I can. So let's talk a little bit about what's happened over the last week at the federal, state, county, and city level. So, okay, first on Sunday, Governor Newsom signed a new executive order that made the following changes. And this kind of, this wasn't like a big fanfare, but it was really important, especially from a county standpoint. One, he allowed eviction suspensions for those negatively affected by the coronavirus and the economic downturn to last until July 28th. So it was initially set to expire on May 31st, and that has now been extended to July 28th. We'll see if it has to be extended even longer, but is now 2 months later than when it was initially meant to expire. That order also, from a DMV standpoint, allowed them to extend waivers to allow for mail-in driver's license and ID cards. So that has been an ongoing issue. Some DMVs have opened to long lines and difficulties of maintaining safe social distancing. So that is, part of that reaction to make sure that we still can drive, we still can, apply for renewals for our DMV cards. And so a lot of this response, is directly related to the continual need for managing coronavirus closures across the state during this economic downturn. Okay, on better news, so on Monday, Sunnyvale kicked off Pride Month. So June 1st, we had a flag raising event at City Hall. And you'll still see that flag all month in front of City Hall. I gave a few comments, and there was even a car parade. So it was my first car parade around City Hall. So the flag will be flying all month. I really hoped after, council approved the Pride flag to fly during Pride Month in Sunnyvale last year, that we would actually have a big ceremony this year. That with the sheltering in place, that wasn't feasible. I was happy that there were a good number of residents that showed up to join the car parade. There were a few other council members, and I appreciate them for joining the event. It was a low-key event. We were all doing safe social distancing. We were all wearing our masks. But I do think it is important, especially in the time of COVID-19 and so many issues, to show support for our LGBTQ community and just show what's right from a community standpoint. Also on Monday, the county issued a new health order. And so that was a big deal. As a recap, 2 weeks ago, the new county order went in place. So that order made two big changes. One, the previous order allowed retailers to provide curbside pickup services. So that was important for anybody with access to an outside door, alleyway, sidewalk. They couldn't put things out on the street, but they could finally, provide, like Lee's Books and, some of our sporting goods stores, they could provide items at the door to residents who wanted to buy something. And then the other thing that previous order put in place was it standardized sign templates from the county website. So you should be seeing COVID-19 prepared, as well as social distancing protocols for visitors, signs in the businesses that are open, restaurants, retail throughout the county. And so that's really important to standardize, what those signs look like and standardize kind of a process standpoint. But more important, and it did a few minor things. It allowed, outdoor museums, historical sites, car parades, especially during, graduating week. And it was a lot of our students are graduating this week. So it was important from that standpoint. But as I said last week, every 2 or 3 weeks, we'll continue to see, changes to the county health order as we move into stage 2 and stage 3. Hopefully, depending upon whether or not there's a surge of new cases, this will be something that we're tracking from a city standpoint. But as things continue to open up, it's important that you'll see these orders change every few weeks, and hopefully we just continue moving forward throughout the summer. So the new county health order, so today as of 12:01 a.m., the new health order went into place. And this changed a lot of big things. Most importantly, additional businesses which need to follow social distancing, but it just changed what their access was. So outdoor dining at all restaurants and other facilities that prepare and serve food is now allowed. Retail and shopping centers for in-store shopping is now allowed. So conceivably, from a retail standpoint, everyone's allowed inside the sporting goods store. So everyone is allowed inside Lee's Books and other small stores within our city. Customers need to be wearing a mask. They need to maintain safe social distancing. So that's really important. Child care, summer camp, summer school, all educational recreational programs are now allowed for all children, not just essential workers, as long as they stay in stable groups of up to 12 children. And so that's really important. That, I've heard this from many parents that want to have their kids socially interact with other kids, and now that can be, that those summer camps are allowed, and the city is signing residents up, kids up for their summer camps right now. The new order as of today allowed all manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, so that restocks things, and a certain of our manufacturers can now start operation again. House cleaning and other non-contact in-house services are now allowed. So those people that do have a housekeeper or someone to clean their house, to assist cleaning part of their house because they can't do it themselves, they can now come back in. Low contact or no contact service businesses can now restart. So that applies to shoe repair or watch repair. And several people have asked about pet grooming. So all pet grooming is now allowed. And so, a lot of things are opening up. We'll see, how well people follow the orders, how people, wear their, do safe social distancing, wear their face masks. I just wanted to clarify one of the things that the county officer emphasized as far as restaurants. And we'll go into that a little bit later, but from a restaurant dining standpoint, its tables should have no more than 6 people. All the people at the table should be from the same household. So this isn't a big everybody go out and start social interaction. This is just allowing restaurants to come now, and that will be happening later, but this will allow restaurants to start providing outdoor seating for people to actually provide food outdoors, sit outside, and also bring back some of the serving staff. So starting to employ those, which is really, really critical. Members, let's see, and all the seats should be separated by, all the tables should be separated by at least 6 feet. So we'll start seeing things spread out onto the sidewalks and soon onto Murphy Avenue. Alcohol may be sold to patrons in conjunction with a meal, but still may not be sold independently. So they're not allowing bars to immediately, move out to the street. They need to be providing food with their drinks. And bar areas themselves must still remain closed. Other things today's order put in place was additional activities. So it allowed small ceremonies. So that's either religious services or funerals in groups no larger than 25. So I know a lot of the churches, a lot of the religious facilities have started to want to have at least small gatherings, and so they can now do that up to 25. Outdoor recreational activities that don't involve physical contact are now allowed, as long as there's appropriate social distancing. So we've already had a lot of that, tennis, golf, hiking. One thing that was added this week was swimming pools, and then camping, subject to limitations and social distancing. And of course, drive-in theaters are now allowed, so other car-based gatherings. So, for those of you that have gone to the drive-in theater, we do have one in the area that will be opening back up. But all this is kind of related to social distancing protocols. All businesses must complete the social distancing protocol sheet. They must, fill that out and be displaying that. So that's a quick summary of what changed today. I think there's still a certain number of questions as far as, some details of that summary that I have questions back to the county on, but hopefully that kind of lays out that a lot of things are open as opposed to, just a week ago, and be seeing more activity in our different surface streets. A lot of our retail and a lot of restaurants have already been open, but now this gives them some ability to have patrons order and sit down and eat at that restaurant. On Tuesday, so busy week, Santa Clara Board of Supervisors extended the county-wide eviction moratorium for residents and small businesses. So that urgency ordinance now is extended to July 28th. And if you remember, previously Sunnyvale City Council had clarified that to make sure that ordinance also covered both the whole mobile home community, and also extended the payback period from 12 weeks to 18 weeks. The ordinance that was provided by the county, though, which used to be 120 days. It's now 12 months. So they've extended quite a bit, and this is important for those people that have been sheltering in place and hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, from an employment standpoint, from not being able to pay their bills. So it's extended that payback period of when we terminate or the eviction moratorium, or it expires. So currently the end of July. Residents will have, or business owners will have, 12 months to pay back that rent. And one of the important things of that ordinance is tenants will need to pay back the first 50% of the deferred rent within the first 6 months of the expiration or termination. So it is important that the landlords are getting paid back, and the board's action, so the Board of Supervisors action, also prohibits imposing or collecting late fees on any rent that was deferred. And then, of course, it also requires landlords to inform tenants of their rights and their options. So I think this was really good from a county standpoint. We didn't think that 3 months was enough. We thought 6 months was enough. The county has now said it needs to be a year, that people have a chance to respond to what's been happening. And then on Tuesday at 1 p.m., the Sunnyvale Cares program application period ended. So we talked about the Sunnyvale Cares program. We had, this was a program to give grants of up to $15,000 to Sunnyvale businesses. And we had raised, between the city putting in $600,000 and, a lot of our tech businesses and, other developers putting in additional funds, were over $1.3 million in the current fund. Small business, so a lot of small businesses applied. We had over 600 apply. And so the next step is, basically what happens is we randomize the order of which those were applied in. One of the things was, we didn't want to make sure that it was just the first few people that applied. We wanted to give them a time period, and so over that, we take all those applications, and then they randomize that, and then they start making sure that they qualify, and if they qualify, then giving them those grants. As far as the high-tech companies that stood up, that also contributed: Google, LinkedIn, JPaul Development, Intuitive Surgical, Facebook, Lockheed. They've all helped contribute into this fund, and I really appreciate all of that, because this is how we're making sure that some of the businesses that have been hit so hard can survive through this period. And then, so that was for small businesses. On Wednesday, the Sunnyvale opened up its nonprofit assistance grant program. So similar to what we did. So Sunnyvale first gave money to Sunnyvale Community Services to assist residents for rent, utilities, food, whatever's needed. So we've given them almost, committed to them almost $1 million. And then, we set aside 600,000 for our small businesses, which then some of our larger companies came up and said we want to help out also. On Wednesday, we also opened up an application period for a nonprofit assistance grant program. So similarly to the small businesses and the residents in need, this is the city committed $150,000 to create the nonprofit grant program, and this allows nonprofits to apply for up to $30,000 for Sunnyvale nonprofits. So these are specifically for nonprofits that exist in our city. Grants will not be awarded to any organization that has a debt to the city. It's most important that it's focused on those organizations supporting a public purpose, providing services that complement or enhance the service of the city. So, hopefully that will help out, the organizations. The application period is currently open. It does not close until the end of June. So the deadline for the nonprofit assistance program ends on June 30th at 5 p.m. If you or know of a nonprofit or run a nonprofit and want to apply, go to the same Sunnyvale website, sunnyvale.ca.gov/svcares, and all the application information is there. And then on Wednesday, Governor Newsom issued a new executive order that kind of went in conjunction with an order that he issued last month. So the new order required that each county must open one non-person voting location for every 10,000 registered voters 3 days before the November 3rd election. And it's important that, from that standpoint, he said, so let's see. The counties must also open one ballot drop-off for every 15,000 voters, and then last month, that the Governor Newsom also issued the executive order that mail-in ballots will be sent to all registered voters, and it's really important that everyone register to vote for the November election. This is every election is an important election, especially this year. And so, this was to make it easier for everyone to vote, was first to have the mail-in registration, but it's important to also have a certain percentage of open ballot centers throughout the county. So making sure for those people that need additional assistance that there is something available. If they have problems with their ballot, if they there needs to be some other way, because if we're forcing everyone to mail it in, they need to have some place to go at the end of the day to either get a replacement ballot if they didn't receive theirs, or if there's a problem, if they need additional assistance, that's available. On Wednesday, I was happy to be part of a press conference at San Jose City Hall as elected officials from around the county took an equity pledge. And so, Silicon Valley is one of the wealthiest communities in the world. And while, many are prospering and thriving, many still aren't. And so it was important from my standpoint, to make sure that all cities in the county and the county itself is looking at, that economic, environmental, inequities and the injustices that we see across the county. And, as these inequities widen, it threatens all of our prosperity when people are moving out of our cities and moving farther and farther away and traveling hours to get to their job in Silicon Valley. So, you know, all cities have room to improve, you know, on the inequities in our community. And Sunnyvale has done a lot over the last few years, you know, from a minimum wage standpoint, which Sunnyvale was one of the main drivers for, from a county standpoint. Right now, you know, Sunnyvale and Mountain View have the highest minimum wage at $16.05 of any city in the nation. And that's really important. And that's trying to help out with some of those inequities. You know, from a underserved community standpoint, we just approved the branch library in the Lakewood neighborhood, which is an underserved community. And, you know, just looking at the funding that, you know, that we're giving, you know, out to, on a yearly basis, we give to a lot of nonprofits, you know, assisting different areas. We have the Columbia Neighborhood Center, you know, giving about $1 million this year to Sunnyvale Community Services. You know, we're trying to do whatever we can to help those in need in our community, and that's really important. Let's move on to the county dashboard. So new cases continue to drop. Over the last week, let's see, we had about, well, we currently have about 2,850 cases. That's up from about 2,700 last week, so about another 150 cases. San Jose went from 1858, or sorry, went to 1858, up about 90 cases from last week. Sunnyvale now has had 162 COVID cases, 2 more cases over the last week. And we're averaging about 1,800 tests a day now. So that's actually very good. Actually, no, it's higher than that. That was a few days ago. We're now averaging about 1,900 tests a day. The average positivity rate is 0.94%, so less than 1%. So it's important that you know, we continue to track these numbers. We've been, you know, continuing to see more test locations. You know, hospital availability on the county still looks good, and so it's all those factors that we continue to look at is how much testing are we doing, how many cases have we seen, what's the availability of the hospitals. All those are important as we continue to look at measures for opening up the county and making sure that people are still safe and that there's not a big surge. You know, over the last week, I've been doing lots of advocating. You know, I talked to our county supervisors, you know, just last night, and we're trying to get a mobile per city van to go. So you know, I talked the last few weeks about Mountain View, and the mobile van is coming to Mountain View once a week. But we're trying to do that now, you know, a half day in different cities around the county, just because we know that, especially as we open up, there will be a lot more people that need to get tested. You know, all the restaurant workers, the servers, you know, the retail store workers, and residents themselves that think that they might have been exposed to COVID-19. So it's really important that we get as much testing availability as possible. And then from a tracing standpoint, which I've talked about previously, if people, you know, want to help out with tracing, because as people show cases, they need to look at who they've been exposed to over the last few weeks and reach out to all those. You know, we're talking about, you know, dedicating certain city staff, and certain of our CERT members are also committed to that. Let's see. Anything else? Okay. Let's move on to other questions. So here are some of the questions that I received over the last week. Is there a city curfew? No, there is not. A lot of cities added them. You know, from our county, San Jose, the city of Santa Clara, and Palo Alto had curfews at one point. All of them ended yesterday morning. So there were a lot of people that were, you know, contacted me because part of the issue was the city of Santa Clara versus Santa Clara County, and there's a lot of confusion from that standpoint. Our county decided not to do it, and I, talked to the city manager, and we made that decision that it really didn't seem to be necessary in our communities, and from other counties, it was seen as either a good or a bad thing. Last night I think Oakland had a protest, not a racial protest, but a protest against the curfew. Was last night or the night before, and I think is showing that concept of a curfew, isn't always seen in a positive light by residents. Let's see. Someone's curious about the new construction of the property along the corner of Hollenbeck and El Camino. I haven't seen any for lease signs. Did something fall through? Are there businesses waiting to move in? So this is on the south side of Hollenbeck and El Camino. So that building was finished. Ultimately, it's going to be doctor's offices of some sort. They've been doing a lot of interior work in that building. That should open up soon. One of the questions I got from multiple people: did you see Obama's speech this week? Did you sign on to the mayor's pledge? Yes, I saw Obama's speech, and I was really inspired by his video address this week. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, definitely do. He is a great speaker. I just love what he said, and everything that President Obama says is really heartfelt. And I did sign on to the mayor's pledge. And so for those of you that didn't hear about the speech or what the mayor's pledge was, let me give you a quick overview. It's basically asking mayors and other city officials that are positioned to introduce a common sense limits on police use of force, and it's done in conjunction with the Mother's Keeper Alliance. And so it's basically asking us to do several things. One, to review our police force policies. Two, to engage our communities by including a diverse range of input, experiences, and stories. Three, report the findings of your review back to the community and for feedback. And then finally, reform the community policy use on, reform the police force policies. And so everyone could support this effort. I think as mayor, it's important for me to sign on to that and do a commitment that we will, continue to evaluate that. And we'll talk about, some of the other questions I received in just a moment. But that, that mayor's pledge to me was really important. And I think the somber tone and, heartfelt message from President Obama really, touched a lot of people in our community, as well as I think a lot of elected leaders around the country. Another question: what are you doing to improve DPS procedures? 8 can't wait. Can we do better than the 6 of the 8 items? So I've gotten, let's say, hundreds of emails from all over the U.S. about how Sunnyvale should change its police policies. And from my standpoint, I agree that police policies need to be reviewed, and the 8 can't wait didn't really capture, everything in my mind for what our Department of Public Safety does and how they continue to train, and and from our standpoint, how those policies continue to change. So I've had multiple conversations with the city manager, with our public safety chief, and more work can always be done, and there's always room to improve. And I think that this is, to me, is a dialogue. This is continuing, getting feedback from our community, making sure that public safety is listening. And I think we have a fantastic public safety department. From my standpoint, I've had lots of dealing with them over the years. And especially as mayor, I've done ride-alongs. I've seen, I went through the Citizens Academy, and our public safety is fairly unique, and that in itself has changed things. There was a good social media post yesterday that public safety put out that I'll kind of touch on and quickly summarize for those of you that didn't see it. But from our standpoint, we've gotten a lot of questions. They've gotten a lot of questions regarding their training, their mental health crisis intervention, their de-escalation and use of force. And Sunnyvale is unique in that it has a fully integrated public safety department. So we provide fire, police, EMS services to our community. And for me, that really is really important because it also changed the mindset of our officers, and it also changes the interaction of our residents to our public safety department. So this helps reinforce a culture of serving and protecting the public with the utmost respect for the sanctity of life, because every police officer is a fireman. When there's a fire, our police officers show up, do some crowd control, pop the trunk, and become firemen on the spot. And so our public safety continues to look at improving its policing principles. And so I'll go through some of those. Body worn cameras. So I had a question just today. Can we require body worn cameras? So we've already done this from a city standpoint. In 2016, the department implemented body worn camera program. All officers are equipped with cameras, and they're required to record all interactions with the public. So that's really critical, and as we see, from around the country, that is not the case for all public safety, and I think that's really important. All of our sworn officers go through bias-based policy training. So that's important as far as bias training is concerned. They also go through mental health training. So basically, there's a peace officer standard and training on mental health and dealing with how to interact with people who are going through a mental health crisis. And our department also provides enhanced 40-hour crisis intervention training. So we do a lot of training on an ongoing basis for our officers. There's mental health cause management. For over 10 years, our officers have going through that training. And then de-escalation, it's expected that every member of our department utilize de-escalation techniques whenever possible and only use force when necessary. And all use of force all use of force incidents are documented. They're required to be documented, and they're reviewed by the deputy chief or the chief of police. So that process is there. There's internal affairs review. In 2017, the department worked with an outside consultant to completely revise and modernize our internal affairs investigations, looking into the misconduct of sworn officers. And all this is, in a internal affairs manual. There's also a use of force policy. So in 2019, the department, formed a use of force working group to review our use of force policy. And that's led to 3 objectives: reviewing the current use of force, evaluating our use of force training program, and evaluate use of force practices by our officers on an ongoing basis. And these programs and policies are only effective if our officers continue to reflect the values of our department, and the public safety chief continue to work hard to basically build that cultural empathy, compassion, respect, and dignity for every resident in our city. They strive to basically incorporate these values in everything they do. And it's also that interaction. It's the youth leagues. It's the youth academy that's run by our public safety. It's the Citizens Academy that's run by public safety. It's the Sunnyvale PAL League, the Police Officers League that helps at-risk students, helps our at-risk youth make sure that they don't get, keeping them out of gangs, getting them other, alternatives as far as education, as far as, athletics, which really is really important. Other questions? When will the swim center open? So as of today's order, uh, the public swimming pools are allowed to be open if they're outside. So that was one of the parts of the health order, that not indoor swimming pools, but only outdoor pools can be open. And city staff is currently evaluating that. I'm a young adult. Another question. I'm a young adult and looking for a job. Where can I go for help? And so it's difficult for a lot of people right now. A lot of people are out of work, but things are starting to open up. A lot of businesses are bringing people back. So, I will always point to Nova. Nova is our work. Basically Nova Works program manages. If you're out of a job right now, if you're unemployed, it does several things for you. It does training, but it also helps you apply for EDD. So definitely feel free to reach out for them. But they also do summer programs for youth. So young adults that between the ages of 17 and 24, if they're looking for volunteer opportunities, if they need to explore occupations, if they need help writing a resume, how to search for employment, consider, choices for jobs, education, careers, they're here. And even though we're sheltering in place, they will be active this summer. This year, the summer program will begin June 15th, and it'll all take place remotely, offering 12 different workshops for residents, for those youth, for those young adults that are trying to look for work. And if people are interested, and if you're interested in other Nova services, consider going to novaworks.org, NOVAWORKS.org, or give them a call at 408-568-7776. And so, yeah, I think this is a great program, and hopefully, if you're looking for a job, this is a good way to get a leg up as far as understanding, what can be done. And they also have, on their board, they have, quite a few members of different businesses, that are running different businesses around the county, around both counties in the Bay Area. And they're also helping, new applicants find jobs. And that's a variety of businesses. It's just not high-tech businesses. It's automotive businesses. It's financial businesses. It's banking, whatever that case is. And so definitely they have a lot of opportunity there if you're looking for jobs. Next, will the Art and Wine Festival be rescheduled for later this summer? Right now, I don't think so. I've been in talks with the Chamber of Commerce. It was initially, they thought it was going to be pushed back from June to July. Obviously, we're not ready. We're not at stage 4 for big concerts and big events yet. And there's been talk about moving it to the fall. My guess is it won't happen in 2020, but we'll see. It's like this. The Art and Wine Festival isn't a city activity. It is, it's been put on yearly by the chamber, and they do a fantastic job of bringing people, into our community to celebrate that. And the Art and Wine Festival is always a yearly event that normally happens, the first week of June, and so would have happened either this weekend, but not happening this year, and maybe in the fall, but we'll see. There's a lot of logistical issues about trying to reschedule any event like that. Let's see. And then the question, are all Sunnyvale police officers required to wear and turn on body cameras? If not, how can we pass a law to make that happen? Council worked with, public safety about 5 years ago, and that's what I've already talked about. Body cameras are required and are required to be on whenever they're dealing with any action in the city. So in dealing with the public. Let's see. can we automate body cameras being turned on so officers don't forget to turn them on when they're dispatched? That hasn't been a problem in our city. There's a very a very stringent thing of putting them on. I've been I've on my ride-alongs. I've actually sat with several of the officers and been there when they're checking out their firearms, putting on their body camera. All that is part of the standard process of when they're going on to duty, as far as turning on their cameras and having their having their full fatigues and everything out is going on to duty. So I think that's not an issue. With former President Obama's town hall a couple days ago, there were actionable steps that our city can do to reduce opportunity for police brutality. Where do you stand on these recommendations? And so, yes, so from that standpoint, I signed on to the mayor's pledge. From the 8 can't wait item, definitely, I think that from that standpoint, I do think that I was talking to the chief about this yesterday. He was talking to some of the organizers, and they hadn't fully realized that the bias training that we have, our de-escalation policies and training. And so whether or not 6 of 8 measures that still need to be done is the correct thing, definitely we need to reevaluate based upon what's listed there. But from my standpoint, it's like, I think that this is a dialogue, and making sure that all of our residents are actually being heard, and making sure that our public safety, and I think our public safety is doing a great job, but making sure that they're that they understand the concerns of the community, and having a way to do complaints. There's already a way for people to raise complaints, and that's part of the policy, and it's on the city website. That's already been there for a long time, but it's important from the other standpoint of trying to figure out how to make sure that if there is racial inequity, if there's people in our community that don't feel safe dealing with the police, how to bridge that barrier and make sure that our police officers, our fire officers, our public safety is seen in the highest regard by everyone in the community. From my standpoint, one of the most fun things out of the year is National Night Out. The first Tuesday in August every year is National Night Out, when the people, when neighbors gather together to basically celebrate, and to kind of get to know each other better, and having public safety, the motorcycle, the fire department, the canine officers go out and interact with residents in the neighborhood. And I think that's always good, because it's keeping that dialogue open and making sure that residents are being heard, that they feel comfortable and feel safe in our communities. Sunnyvale is a very safe city, but can it have change? Definitely, there's always room for our policies to be changed. Other questions? Let's see. Could you talk about the Sunnyvale Unity newsletter? Just joined the mailing list. Very excited. What can we expect from that mailing list? So that's being run by the city manager, and Jackie Guzman, who basically led the Unity event all the logistics of the Unity event that we had last year, is going to be one of the main people dealing with that. But from that standpoint, it's to start dialogues. It's to start exactly what people are asking for. Figuring out whether, and hopefully it will not all be Zoom meetings, and so hopefully there will, before the next month or two is out, we'll be able to have meetings where people can come and attend, safe, socially distanced, but make sure that people can be heard and see each other and see our officers. That to me is important. It's difficult, as much as this, remote office hours has worked out fairly well, it would be good to see all of your faces. And I don't do a Zoom meeting, mainly because this really is an address, and logistics make it very difficult to manage. But I do think it's important from that standpoint. Do the religious groups of 25 need to be outdoors? Yes. So as far as I read the order, uh, those religious services need to be happening outdoors, and and that's only at the county level. I know that, from a state standpoint, it's quite a bit more open and quite a bit more open ended. But I'll double check that. There's a lot of documentation, and a lot of emails that I get, and so I might have missed a detail there. Let's see. How often should people get tested? Like if you're a server at a restaurant, once a week. So, that is a big question. It's like from essential worker standpoint, I do think that that's important. I think all the people working in senior centers, hospice centers, restaurants, it only makes sense that they're getting tested once a week just to make sure that they're not contagious. Of course, if they're, not exhibiting symptoms, it a lot of them will push it off. But I do think it's important that everyone get tested once a week. That's one of the reasons why we continue to try to increase the viability of how many tests we're doing a day. But as we start to open up, I think that there will be hopefully a blip of a spike, but we'll hopefully see that that's not too bad. Let's see. When will the Santa Clara County EDD offices reopen? Not really sure about them. As I said before, talk to Nova Works, and they probably will have that information. So contact them at their website, novaworks.org, novaworks.org, or give them a call. And when will Cycle Bar be able to open again? Currently indoor. They are not like a gym and an indoor cycling studio, and they already have an action plan. So this is one of the things I've been pushing the county on. Indoor cycle studios, Pilates, yoga, all those indoor sports that people can socially distance. There can be measures put in place. They haven't added it to the order. My guess is it'll probably be part of the next order, but it is not part of the current order. And so, I continue to advocate for people that have asked that, for business owners that have asked that of me. Right now, that's not part of the current health order. When a first responder reports to a medical call, do they also have body cameras on? I don't know that answer. From a privacy standpoint, I'm not really. I'm not positive. Usually, that I have no idea about. I'll find that answer out. Regarding today's protest, what has been done by the city to ensure the safety of both protesters and residents? So, the Department of Public Safety has basically been in contact with the organizers quite a bit, figuring out the best route. So right now it goes from Redwood Square down McKinley to Matilda, and making sure that appropriate traffic barriers are put in place so that people can cross Matilda safely, and then going across at McKinley onto Matilda safely, and then down Matilda on the sidewalk down to Olive. So making sure that we're trying to do as much as possible to make sure that there aren't any bad actors and people feel safe, crossing our streets with all the cars, and there aren't any issues as far as that goes. If you go to tonight's march, consider getting tested next week. So I will be doing safe social distancing. I will be wearing my mask, and I'm hoping that anybody who is there will be doing that. I do think it's important that, people, and I've seen this in Mountain View, I've seen this in Palo Alto, I've seen this in Los Altos, that people are providing are doing the right thing as far as COVID-19. You know, it's amazing how quickly a lot of people have forgotten about COVID-19 in the last week, but that threat is still there from a virus standpoint, um, and from that standpoint, you know, it's really critical that, you know, people stay safe. We don't want to see a big uptick in cases. So I'm hoping that if you're planning to attend, or if you're not, and out, you know, dining on Murphy Avenue tonight, or over the next week, please be safe. And we're almost out of time. Lastly, could you explain how citizens can report witnessing law enforcement using unnecessary force, and who reviews these policies, and who reviews and polices these reports? And so there's a URL online. I'll put it on my site. I've mentioned it earlier this week, I think, as far as where that complaint can be done. Oh, I might have done that on Nextdoor. I'm using a lot of different social media, so I'm not really sure where I posted that. But there's a whole complaint process. You can either fill it out, you can do a verbal complaint, and then that, as I said previously, that's reviewed by the deputy chief and the chief of police, for whether or not there needs to be some sort of action taken against an officer. So that is some of the questions that I received this week. If I didn't get to your question, it looks like I've received quite a few questions, but from that standpoint, it's been a busy week for everyone. And let me just go ahead and wrap up at this point. You know, I thank you as always for joining me for these. You know, I do think that it's really important, you know, for everyone for me to answer the questions, and I hope it makes you feel more comfortable with me as a mayor, as well as, you know, what our city's doing. I'll continue to hold these as long as I can. You know, I continue to be proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic, and, you know, keep in mind that please help your neighbor. You know, make and share masks, share homemade bread, homemade cookies. Continue to build community while we're sheltering in place. You know, I'm really proud to see, you know, Sunnyvale residents pulling together with their neighbors and strangers. You know, the protest tonight is kind of a continuation of that. It's you know, high school students and Sunnyvale residents who want to get together and walk in solidarity. And, you know, from that standpoint, I think that shows what our community is made of. So if you're out on a walk, you know, wave, say hello to other people, you know, all from a safe distance. People miss that daily interaction. You know, from a Sunnyvale standpoint, we have a great community. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're all in this together, and we'll get through this together. Thanks for listening again to me this week, and until next week, have a safe week. Thanks for joining. Take care. Bye.